Wednesday evening, Natasha's apartment. Tony pulled up outside a modest apartment complex. He looked at the address again, smirking to himself. This was his first time visiting Natasha's place, and from the looks of it, she lived in a surprisingly low-profile spot. Smart. It fit her cover perfectly. Stepping out of his sleek Audi R8, he adjusted his jacket and walked toward the entrance, hands in his pockets. The building was simple, clean, and well-maintained, but nothing flashy. Definitely not what you'd expect from a world-class spy. But that was the point, wasn't it? He reached her door and rang the bell twice. A moment later, Natasha opened it, leaning casually against the frame. She wore a loose off-shoulder sweater and fitted black leggings, effortlessly alluring, but casual enough to seem unintentional. She smiled, tilting her head slightly. Right on time. Color me impressed, she said. Tony smirked. Punctuality is my middle name. I thought it was trouble, she teased, stepping aside to let him in. Tony glanced around as he entered. The apartment was small but well decorated, minimalistic yet warm. A few books were stacked on a corner table, a simple gray couch, and a kitchen that looked barely used. No personal photos, no real sign of attachment. It was a temporary home, just like she was a temporary employee in his restaurant. You know, he said, looking around, I expected more flair. Maybe a punching bag in the corner. Some throwing knives hidden in the furniture. Natasha smirked. You checked under the couch already? Tony raised an eyebrow. Should I? She chuckled and walked toward the kitchen. Drink? That depends. Are you actually offering, or is this a trick question? Relax, boss, she said over her shoulder. No poison. Just beer. She grabbed 2 cold bottles from the fridge, popping the caps effortlessly before handing him one. Tony took it, eyeing her playfully. No wine? No fancy vodka? Not tonight. She clinked her bottle against his. To a peaceful dinner. Tony smirked. We both know it won't be peaceful. They each took a sip. What Tony didn't know, or at least what Natasha thought he didn't know, was that she had laced his beer with a carefully measured cocktail, a mild truth serum and a subtle aphrodisiac. Nothing too obvious. Just enough to lower his guard, loosen his tongue, and increase certain impulses. She had played this game before, but never against Tony Stark. That he was her target, her mission. He wasted enough of her time. And she wasn't about to let this opportunity slip away. Tony, on the other hand, already knew. His nanites had detected the tampering before he even took a sip, but he played along. The drugs won't even affect him at all, and he had expected Natasha to try something like this. After all, their entire dynamic had been built on layers of deception. But tonight, he planned to end their little cat-and-mouse game. So, Natasha said, settling onto the couch, curling her legs beneath her. You've been busy lately. Tony took another sip, leaning back in his chair. Oh, you know me. Always something to build, something to fix. And that something wouldn't happen to involve certain experiments, would it? She ran a finger along the rim of her bottle, watching him closely. Tony chuckled. Oh, Nat, if you wanted to know what I was working on, you could have just asked. And you'd tell me? Depends. What's in it for me? He smirked. She smiled, shifting closer, her green eyes meeting his with playful challenge. Well, that depends on what you want, doesn't it? Tony swirled the beer bottle in his hand, his smirk deepening. Dangerous question, Romanoff. What if I say something you're not ready for? Natasha leaned in slightly, tilting her head with a smirk of her own. Try me. Oh, he was tempted. But he wasn't going to let her control the pace of this game. He glanced down at his beer, pretending to be lost in thought. Well, he said, taking another slow sip, I suppose I could use some motivation. Something worth spilling my darkest secrets over. Natasha arched an eyebrow, playing along. Like what? Tony exhaled, setting the bottle down on the table between them. Then, he leaned forward, closing the space between them just enough to make her pulse quicken. A kiss. From you. Right here, right now. And then you can ask me any one question you want, and I'll answer honestly. No tricks, no games. The drugs are working. Natasha tilted her head, giving him a look of amused disbelief. Really? You want me to kiss you? You offered, he replied, looking at her expectantly. I did. Natasha looked into his eyes, studying his face with a small smile. His expression was playful, confident, yet soft. It was an unusual mix, one that made her pulse race. How does he do that? She thought, unable to look away. Is it the serum? She bit her lip, her gaze falling to his mouth. She felt his breath against her skin, his lips barely grazing hers, teasing her, tempting her. She closed her eyes, leaning in slightly. For a moment, nothing happened. Tony remained perfectly still, his eyes fixed on her. And then, she pressed her lips against his, gently at first, and then more forcefully as the tension broke. Her kiss was soft but passionate, and Tony felt his desire stirring inside him, begging him to take her in his arms and make her his, but he held back. Instead, he pushed his nanites out, letting them spread across Natasha's lips and enter her body through her pores. He sent the microscopic robots through her mouth, into her bloodstream, spreading throughout her system. Now, there was nowhere she could hide from him. Tony knew she would try to use some kind of drug to get him to talk. It was her modus operandi, and he had expected it. But he hadn't counted on this kind of reaction. As their lips parted, Natasha couldn't help but let out a quiet gasp, her eyes fluttering open. She looked at him with an expression of surprise and desire that made his heart beat faster. Why are you so good at kissing? She couldn't help but blurt out. Tony smirked. Good? You are my first kiss. Natasha chuckled softly, shaking her head. No, that's not possible. No way I'm your first. It's true, Tony said, smiling. You're the first woman I've ever kissed. Natasha looked at him with wide eyes. How is that even possible? You're, like, a billionaire. Women must be throwing themselves at you every day. I have more important things to focus on, he replied. Besides, I never really saw the point in all that nonsense. You know, the whole hookup culture thing. Yeah, right. You are just cooped up in that lab of yours. I'm pretty sure if you get out more often then you would find plenty of willing women. Natasha replied. Tony shrugged. Is that so? Is the woman before me saying she's willing? Natasha smiled. That depends on what you're asking. Tony leaned forward, placing his hand on her cheek. He traced a finger along her jaw, bringing his lips close to hers. I want you, Natasha. Her breath caught in her throat as his words sent a shiver down her spine. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the strong muscles beneath his shirt. Her mind was racing, but she forced herself to calm down. Get a hold of yourself, Romanoff, she thought. This is what he wants. He's trying to throw you off balance. He's good. Even with that dosage, he's holding on pretty good. Only if you tell me what you do. You can't expect a lady to go out with a man without knowing a little about him, she purred, brushing her lips against his. Tony's hand slid behind her head, pulling her closer. His other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her body flush against his. He could feel the warmth of her skin through her sweater as his fingers trailed up her back. Tell me, Natasha, what is the one thing you want? The one thing you wish to have but can't? The one thing that makes your heart ache when you think about it? Natasha hesitated, her eyes searching his. She knew she shouldn't answer, but she couldn't help herself. To be free. There's something more. I can see it in your eyes. You want to be free, but there's something else. Something you want even more than freedom. Something that keeps you awake at night and makes your heart ache when you think about it. Tony said as he continued to caress her face. Natasha's breath hitched in her throat, her lips parting slightly as she gazed into his eyes. She couldn't look away from him, and she knew he was right. There was something else. Something she had wanted for so long but never thought she could have. The experiments, training, and harsh discipline she endured in the Red Room flashed before her eyes. The constant drugs and experiments, the cold, sterile lab, and the painful needles piercing her skin, making her body burn with pain and fever. She remembered the nights spent curled up on the floor of her cell, shivering and alone. She remembered the fear and helplessness, she remembered the darkness that swallowed her up and never let go, she remembered it all. She remembered everything. She remembered she could never become a mother after she went through the Red Room's SSS program. I want to become a mother. Have a life filled with freedom, laughter, and love. I want to touch those little hands, feel them curl around my finger, hold them close to me. She breathed out, unable to stop herself. Her voice was barely a whisper as she confessed her deepest desire. What's going on? I can't lie. Well, when Tony pushed the nanites into her body, he made sure to send the extracted truth serum into her body. Now, all she could do was tell him the truth. What's stopping you then? He asked. Tony's gaze held Natasha's as he asked, what's stopping you then? Natasha's lips parted slightly, her breath hitching as the serum forced the truth from her. She wanted to fight it, to keep her composure, to maintain the carefully crafted walls she had built over the years. But the drugs had already seeped into her bloodstream, working their way through her defenses like a slow-burning fire. She clenched her fists, trying to resist, but the words slipped past her lips before she could stop them. The Red Room, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Tony remained still, his expression unreadable. He had expected something like this, but he wanted to hear it all. They sent me, Natasha continued, her green eyes flickering with something between guilt and defiance. I was assigned to get close to you, to spy on you. They wanted to know what you were working on. They're curious about why you've distanced yourself from Stark Industries, why you've buried yourself in a lab after MIT instead of taking over the empire your father built. Tony swirled his beer bottle absent-mindedly, letting her words sink in. And what did you tell them? I told them you were unpredictable, she admitted. That you were working on things that even I couldn't get full access to. That whatever you were building, it was locked away behind layers of security I couldn't crack. She exhaled, frustrated with herself. But I was getting closer. Were you? Tony smirked, tilting his head. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you fell for your own game. Natasha didn't answer. She couldn't. The warmth of his touch, the heat lingering on her lips, it was messing with her focus. She had always prided herself on being the one in control, but right now, under his knowing gaze, she felt exposed in a way she hadn't in years. And what exactly does the Red Room want with my research? Tony pressed. Natasha hesitated again, but the serum wouldn't let her hold back. They think you're building something new. Something dangerous. Something even more advanced than your father's weapons. Tony hummed, taking another sip of his beer. Interesting theory. And what do you think? I think. She met his gaze. I think you're hiding something. Something big. But I don't know what it is. Tony smirked. And yet, you kissed me anyway. You sure this was all just part of the job? Natasha opened her mouth to respond, but Tony leaned in slightly, cutting her off with his next question. Tell me, Natasha, did you kill Madame Hydra? A flicker of surprise crossed her face. A rare, genuine crack in her usual mask. What? Viper, Tony clarified, watching her reaction closely. Did you kill her? Natasha's breath hitched, her pupils dilating slightly. Then, after a pause, she nodded. Yes. Tony didn't look surprised. And what did you do with her eyes? Natasha's brows furrowed. Her eyes? You heard me. She hesitated again, but the truth serum wouldn't let her lie. I didn't keep them. The Red Room took them. Tony's fingers drummed lightly against his bottle. Why? Natasha swallowed hard. Because they found out something. Something about those eyes. Tony leaned forward. What do they open? Her breathing was shallow now. The truth serum was forcing the words from her lips, even as her instincts screamed at her to stop talking. There's an underwater Hydra base. The Red Room discovered it by accident, but they don't know what's inside. Tony's expression darkened slightly. And Viper's eyes are the key. Natasha nodded. Yes. Tony sat back, processing this. Hydra, an underwater base, and Viper's eyes being some kind of access key? That wasn't just a coincidence. Something bigger was at play here. He thought that Zola AI must be there in that base or the original formula of the SSS, and Natasha, whether she had intended to or not, had just given him the key to unraveling it. He looked at her, smirking. You really should have used a stronger dose. Natasha exhaled sharply, glaring at him. Bastard. She began to feel hot and was blushing. Well, it would seem Tony also pushed the aphrodisiac into her body along with the truth serum. His touch made a jolt run through her body. Tony only chuckled. Oh, Romanoff. You should know by now. I always play to win. Natasha's breath was coming faster now, her chest rising and falling as heat curled through her body like a slow-burning fire. She pressed her thighs together, trying to ignore the way her skin tingled under Tony's touch, how every nerve in her body was suddenly hypersensitive. This shouldn't be happening, she thought, clenching her fists. Her body was enhanced, trained, experimented on, and conditioned to resist poisons, toxins, and drugs of all kinds. Truth serums, sedatives, aphrodisiacs, none of it should have affected her. And yet, her mind was clouded, her thoughts slow and unfocused, every inch of her aching for something she shouldn't want. She should be questioning this. She should be fighting it. Instead, she leaned in and kissed him. Tony didn't hesitate. He met her halfway, his lips crashing against hers, tasting the heat and desperation in her kiss. His fingers slid into her hair, gripping just tight enough to make her shudder as he pulled her even closer. Natasha pressed against him, her hands roaming over his chest, tracing the strong lines of muscle beneath his shirt. The fire inside her only burned hotter. Between kisses, she barely managed to whisper, Tony, we have a problem. He hummed against her lips. You don't say. No. Listen. She pulled back slightly, her breath shaky, eyes glazed over with a mix of desire and urgency. By now, the Red Room has heard everything. They're on their way. Tony exhaled slowly, brushing his thumb along her jaw. Romanoff, he murmured, do you really think I didn't plan for that? She blinked, her hazy mind struggling to keep up. What? Tony smirked, his grip on her tightening just slightly. Right now, the Red Room is only seeing and hearing what I want them to see and hear. Her eyes widened, realization dawning through the fog of desire clouding her thoughts. You tampered with my comms. Of course I did, he said smoothly. You didn't really think I'd walk into your game without playing my own, did you? Natasha exhaled sharply, her body still burning, but her mind starting to catch up. The bastard had flipped the game on her. She wasn't sure if she wanted to kill him or kiss him again. He chuckled at her expression. Don't think too much, Nat. Just enjoy the moment. She should be furious. But all she could do was pull him back in for another kiss. Natasha didn't hesitate. She pushed Tony down onto the sofa, straddling him with ease, her legs on either side of his hips. Her hands gripped his shirt as she kissed him harder this time, raw, desperate, as if she were trying to consume him. Tony responded in kind, his hands roaming over her waist, pressing her closer against him. The heat between them was unbearable, like an electric current crackling in the air. Between kisses, his voice came out in a teasing murmur. What if I help you? Natasha barely registered his words at first, too lost in the sensation of his hands, his lips, the fire burning beneath her skin. Help me, she breathed against his mouth, her body pressing into him. Tony smirked, tilting his head back slightly as he looked up at her. What if I give you what you want? His hand slid up her back, tracing slow, lazy circles. What if I undo the damage? What if I fix what the Red Room took from you? Natasha froze, her breath caught in her throat, her body suddenly still atop his. For a moment, she just stared at him, searching his face. That's impossible, she said, her voice quieter now, but laced with something fragile. Tony's fingers traced a slow line down her spine. Impossible for most people, he admitted. But I'm not most people. Natasha swallowed, her heartbeat hammering against her ribs. The damage was done on a cellular level, Tony. My body was altered, my DNA changed. The Red Room serum didn't just make me stronger, it made me sterile. There's no cure for that. Tony's gaze never wavered. What if I told you I could change that? Natasha wanted to scoff, to call him out for giving her false hope, but something in his eyes stopped her. He wasn't joking. He wasn't messing with her. He was serious, her fingers curled against his chest. You're saying you can undo what they did to me? I'm saying I will, Tony corrected. His voice was steady, unwavering, filled with the kind of confidence that made people believe the impossible. His hands rested on her waist, grounding her. All you have to do is trust me. I can rewrite the damage. I can fix it. His voice dropped lower, softer. I will give you what you want, Natasha. Her throat tightened, her emotions warring inside her. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. But hope was dangerous. Hope had never been kind to her. She shook her head. Even if you could. The Red Room would never let me go. Tony leaned up slightly, brushing a kiss against the corner of her lips. Then what if I add a little side bonus? Natasha swallowed hard. What? His hands tightened on her hips, his voice a low, steady promise. Freedom. This story continues. Subscribe to the channel for the remaining episodes. Thank you for watching and liking the channel.